The next one is richness of our relationships. Obviously the double play on the word richness. We need to generate wealth from these relationships, whether it's the customer or key relationships, AFL, MCC, government, whatever it might be. But there needs to be a richness as in people want to feel as part of it. And we look at whatever means of communication we can to create that. We use social media quite widely now as a means of personalising relationships in that sense. The next phase is fielding champion teams, which is quite clearly, but the main one, and the one right at the very top here for Melbourne, which is very important, is our growth imperative. Melbourne as a club has to grow. We have the smallest supporter base in the AFL, and we've got half as many kids doing Auskick wearing Melbourne jumpers as the next lowest club. Okay, that's a tough challenge for us, but we've got to change that. Then I'll work through what the various units are in a moment. We then frame it over 4 phases. They're not timed, they're not dated. The only thing which probably has a time frame associated with it is the team aspect of it, because the team ages. But as you know, we've tied ourselves into this age group 18 through to 21, 22 at the moment, and we're growing with that group. So we've got a bit of time on our hands as far as that sort of stuff's concerned. And we use times. This one's about building our capabilities and about broadening our capabilities. So again, they're relatively intuitive measures, and I'll come back to measurement in a moment. The first phase of it all, step 1 in our strategic plan, we just called it the right to play. Melbourne had to get itself back as a competitive club in the competition again. It had been left behind. It had been left behind for not anyone. People like to point fingers. People like to no. It had been left behind because it's a challenging club. It's a challenging environment for the reasons I talked about. Small supporter base. We play at the MCG where we have the most beautiful stadium in the world, but supply massively greater than demand, so that affects pricing, all sorts of things. So there's challenges within it. So we've had to adopt and create a model which suits our club, not just transfer Geelong to here or whatever it might be. We've got different challenges. So we had to get ourselves back in the game. So most of the last 12 months has simply been sitting in this square here, about getting some fundamentals right for our club, whilst then seeding other aspects of what we actually do here. And sometimes you're seeding your future without necessarily investing specifically in your future. The next phase was just simply in the game. Half time in a game of footy, you don't want to be 10 goals down. Against Hawthorn round 1, we were out of the game. Against Adelaide round 3, we were behind but still in the game and were able to win. You just don't want to behind yourself behind the rest of the competition at this phase. Third quarter in any situation has always been the premiership quarter. And so this will be the phase for us, and we've hopefully built enough within all this that we can genuinely challenge, and we'll be able to look our players in the eye by the time they've got to this point and say, you have been given the same opportunity as you would have been given if you were playing for any other AFL club in the competition, and at least as good as the team you're playing today. And that's what we're actually building to. And even when you win it, it's a game never won. Geelong, 1 week after grand final day, win the premiership, celebrate, you're into trade week. It's a tough caper. So even the relentless nature of it again. So we've deliberately set it up like that, and I think we're now in most cases, we're probably in this phase in most areas. And I think you've seen probably enough improvement in our team to understand the evolution and development. And we're even now starting to get into a little bit of this, and I'll mention that in a moment. So within each of these areas, and the ultimate objective is to be built to win, so we don't ever have to go through this cycle ever again. We should always remain competitive. Obviously our team will all evolve. It'll have its times where you expect to have a bit of darkness, but there's always light in regard to that. So they're the phases. But again, deliberately choosing words which people can relate to. Within each of these areas we have then strategic units of which we measure and create measurements against, obviously. The first one is the creed. How do you measure creed? It's a hard one. But I think you can actually talk about it. You almost can talk to your own people and say, is the Melbourne Footy Club looking like you want the Melbourne Footy Club to look? Does it feel like our club? And again, relatively intuitive. Values we do a lot of work on. I spoke about that in a previous Whiteboard Wednesday. We use leading teams, we do models within our club, which are not only player-based, but our staff go through exactly the same thing. Many of the lessons that David talked about in regard to engagement are just so fundamental. And great believer in that. And the most critical value that we talk about is trust and building trust. People trust the trust the direction, trust the vision, trust each other, and we're building on that all the time. Good strategy, which is the frameworks. Good operations, which give you confidence. The most thing, the operations of the organisation give you confidence. Recruiting and retaining, developing great people. Facilities, which have been a massive challenge for us. Melbourne grew out of the MCG. Became the ground of other clubs, so we had to find a new place to train, a new place to socialise, a new place to administer in some cases. Although we're very fortunate, we've still got the core of our organisation based in and around the ground, which we're really pleased about. And then community, and we bring community down to the integrity level, not as part of this growth thing. I think community adds richness into our club, of which most organisations can only strive for. And some of the great opportunities I've had in the game have been by being involved, going to Ndamu or at Fremantle, had the opportunity of going to South Africa and going to the townships and sensing what you could actually do. We've just locked in a deal with the federal government to assist with trachoma, which is this terrible disease, which there's 40,000 young children in indigenous communities. We're the only developed country in the world which fundamentally still has this disease, and there's 40,000 kids in these communities, of which 15,000 of them, under current estimates, will be blind by the time they're 30 or 40. And this is a totally preventable disease by just good, decent hygiene and taking one antibiotic once a year. And so we've got Liam Jarrah and Aaron Davey are going to be the ambassadors for this program. And they've set an ambitious target to get rid of this disease within 5 years. Well, how good will we feel as a club if we've made a great contribution into an area that we previously had nothing to do with? Richness, our relationships, our customer, our brand, and building our brand and creating relationships. Key relationships, always identify what the difference between a customer and a strategic relationship. And the strategic relationship's got to be based on mutuality, reciprocity, these sorts of things. We've had terrific inroads in that area. Our realignment with the MCC and our sense of ourselves is fundamental. But it also gives us an opportunity now to have a conversation with the MCC about how we can play a role within their club, which is one of the most famous clubs in the world. Building champion teams, fairly simple thing. It's about list management, recruiting and retaining the best players, ensuring you're giving yourself the best chance of developing your players, and ultimately it's about team performance. And at the moment, our focus, if we go across this phase, has been very much about list management, really heavy investment at this level, now starting to invest more heavily in player development. And once we get to the premiership quarter, it'll be more about the team performance, the thing which gives you the last 1%. And the final one is about our growth imperative, which is about product development, developing new products for our current market, developing new markets for our current products, that same sort of circular thing that we all deal with. It's about growing our supporter base, and there's going to be heavy investment in this area, and it's also always assessing new business opportunities. And so where we're at, as I said, we're moving into from one phase to the next phase in regard to these sorts of frameworks. And we think, and just about everything, every time someone comes up with a good idea, a good concept, a new thought or whatever, we can say, yeah, that's okay, but you're talking about a step 3 program there. You're not talking about a step 1 at the moment. We'll put that one on hold, and even if the opportunity passes it by, we won't implement anything we haven't got the opportunity of actually seeing through at any time. So that's the main frameworks that we actually utilise. All right, guys, well, thanks very much. Enjoyed that, and hopefully you got something from it. And I know we're all hoping for a big result on Friday, and if you haven't, whether it's mum, sister, partner, anything, but the BCNA, it's a great event, and breast cancer. And so get in behind it. And thanks also to Drake for allowing us to put this on this morning. It's been fantastic. Cool. Thank you.